you saw Purple then. I think it was at a place called the Felt Forum, wasn't it, New York City?
Yes.
And they told you that Gillen was going and that they were looking at Paul Rodgers.
Correct. You know, they asked me to come in and be the singing bass player because they were asking my friend Paul Rodgers to sing. And I thought to myself, well, that would be an interesting scenario. Having Paul come in, and they knew I wasn't going to join if I couldn't sing. So I thought it would be an interesting scenario for Paul and I to share the microphone.
Yeah, it's one of the great quotes from you at the time. I think this came out of the NME or something. And you said, listen, I saw lots of money and the chance to play with a legend in Paul Rodgers. How could anybody turn that down?
No, I mean, Paul, in my opinion, has always been one of the greatest ever rock vocalists and blues. I mean, he's a good friend. But the idea of Purple having the singer leave and then getting Paul and I to come in to do something completely different and to rewrite the history books would have been outstanding.
Incredible. So you're then into the biggest band in the world at that time. There's no ifs and buts. They were the biggest band, biggest selling act on Billboard. Now, you might have had the experience in a band framework. You'd had success, but it wasn't like this, was it? You'd hardly ever touched a drink prior to joining Deep Purple.
No, I didn't. I was not teetotal, but I didn't like alcohol. I just didn't like the feeling of it and the taste of it, and I never actually did. But you know, I mean, that was before all the crazy stuff started. But everything happened in my life for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, you called it what it was the dark side, the dark entity. With success come a certain brand of people.
Yes, and I didn't choose to become, involved in drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. I didn't want to be that when I was a young man. But I unfortunately got on the wrong path for a while. Of course, it took me a minute to recover my status as a non-drinking, non-using human being. But I had a 10-year period where it wasn't fantastic.
Just prior to joining, didn't John Lord actually come to meet your parents?
Yes, he did. He came up. He was the only one that reached out to Mum and Dad. John is a Midlands man as well. He's the East Midlands. And John came up and met my parents. I think John was the reason I joined the band because he was such a kind man.
Yeah. It wasn't just you. Obviously, we know DC David Coverdale as well, who told that great story of sending down the cassette with a picture of him as a Boy Scout. Ian Pace remembered the tape and he said, bloody awful. But they saw and heard something because, again, not a lot of people know, but David Coverdale was the only lead vocalist actually auditioned, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He really was. We heard about 300 or 400 cassettes, you know, and none of them were great at all. And his, you know, we all heard that tone, that really marvelous, deeper tone, the bluesy tone, which we heard on early Whitesnake, which gave us all a bit of a lifeline.
Hey, you know that DC has actually found that cassette. It was in a trunk of his late mother's belongings. He's been talking about it of late, but what a great find.
It is a great find. Wow, I'll talk to him about that. That's great.
Hey, so the album, you went to Clearwell Castle, which is just outside of Gloucestershire. It's still there today. It's a wedding venue, largely, but I don't know whether you've looked at their website, but they have retained the picture of you guys on the balcony.
I love it. You know, I got to go back there, you know, at some point and visit the new owners. I got to go back there. It was a wonderful summer for me. We went there a couple of times, as you know, with Byrne and Stormbringer, but I had a great time at Clearwell Castle.
And so that writing process, and you're in, and there's all the camaraderie there of the band. You did fall prey to the full works of the Blackmore dark sense of humour and the wired up bedroom.
Yeah. I was the first. Well, Richie and I were the first to arrive, and he rigged my bedroom up with wires, and he had a microphone set up where he would spook me out in the middle of the night, which he did. I kind of thought he was going to do that, but I was fast asleep. And I was awoken by ghostly, ghoulish noises. And when you're in deep in sleep, and yeah, it was kind of spooky. It really was.
It was constant as well, wasn't it? Because one of the roadies, you remember a guy called Baz Marshall, who was a farmer.
Yeah, I love Baz Marshall.
Had lost a cow, which reappeared in a ghostly form at a seance.
Yeah, Richie and I and Baz had a couple of seances, and yes, the cow came up, and Baz was really upset. And Richie, funny enough, was quite upset as well.
So the album then, Burn, is it right that Ritchie came up to you and just literally said, look, I love the word burn. Wouldn't it be great if we could record a song called Burn?
Yes. Simple as that. We were down the pub. We had come up with 7 songs, and Ritchie believed we were missing the last piece of the puzzle, and he suggested writing a song called Burn. And later that night, after the pub closed, we went down into the crypt and we wrote that song. And it was magnificent.
People thought that there was some borrowing from bygone eras. And I've seen this before. George Gershwin's, what is it? Something rhythm. Fascinating Rhythm, that's it.
Fascinating Rhythm. Yeah, I don't think Ritchie was aware of that. Gene Simmons is aware of that because Gene talks about it all the time. But when you listen to Fascinating Rhythm by Gershwin and you put Burn on, the opening riff is definitely that Fascinating Rhythm. It's the same riff. So I don't know if Ritchie knows this, but I'm sure he does now.
Mistreated. Was that the first song you wrote together with David?
Well, no, Ritchie. When I went to Ritchie's house in June of '73, he had one piece of music he wanted to play me, and he played me the opening riff and a segue of Mistreated. And when he played it to me, I'm thinking to myself, I think we're going to be okay. Because it was such a great bluesy song. And that was the only piece of music that was written before we went down to Clearwell. No, I have a feeling you do. So, and by the way, it would have been something rambunctious or maybe sex related, because even back then David was doing that. So what was it?
I can't. It was. I'm going to have to leave that for people to actually look it up, because I don't particularly want to offend anybody. But yeah, it is. There's a fair few swear words, one beginning with S, one beginning with F, the C word, and one beginning with W that ends in K.
Okay, well, you know, I'll speak to David in the next couple of weeks. But I'm intrigued because I do remember it being a funny epilogue. Yeah,
it was. Now, Sail Away. Stevie Wonder loved it, didn't he? When you played it to him. Why did he nickname you Leo? By the way,
because he's fascinated by the signs. You know, I was in the record plant in LA, and Stevie was in the next studio in the same building, and I met him in the bathroom, and I asked him if he'd come and sit in with us. You know, I was doing the vocals with David, and when I took Stevie in the studio, David was at the microphone and he couldn't see very well, and he said, "Gee, I don't like it when guests come in the studio." I said, "But David, I said, he said, "I don't care who it is." I said, "But it's Stevie Wonder."
He called you his favorite white singer.
Well, it was a beautiful moment. I mean, I had been listening to Stevie, as you know, Tim, and I was influenced by him. But on those albums, you can hear his influence. But there's no, I look, I'm very happy to announce that I love Stevie. He's now one of my good friends, and a long friendship with him. And I have great moments of recording those songs with David at the microphone.
You took only 10 days in Montreux with the Stones mobile, obviously,
Yeah.
and Martin Birch. Great camaraderie
I
there.
love Martin Birch. Look, again, I only have great things to say about the time I had in Deep Purple. We were very young. It was a 3.5 year period. A lot of music was made, a lot of touring. 3 or 4 albums were made, some live stuff, 3 recording albums. It was a fast and furious time.
February the 15th, 74, it was out charted everywhere. Gold records everywhere in the US, the
Yeah,
UK, Germany, France, Sweden.
yeah.
And the reviews were drooling over
Yeah.
this new sound. How do you feel? I mean, the moment that came out, the moment you see it and you think, I mean, this is huge.
Well, again, I think what they did when they replaced uh, Ian and Roger with uh, 2 different kinds of singers and bass players. They could have gone the route of repeating themselves with the people that sounded like Gillan and Glover, but they didn't. They got more bluesy influenced players, R&B and blues singing, bass playing people, and took a different route. They had to do that. I think they did the right thing. It wasn't supposed to be repeat of Mark II. Mark III was a completely different entity. And I think fans in general appreciated it.
That's
Massive
70.
people. I mean, the line of people out front was staggering, and we were ready to rock. As you can see, we were ready to go.
You were big into design and fashion. Now, when you look back now, what a great idea it was. The white suit.
Yeah,
It looks fantastic now. And basically you did it to be the opposite
I
of
did.
Ritchie Blackmore.
Look, it's not so much of the dark arts versus the white arts. It was that I was figured this Richie's, the black wearing man, as most rock people are. I thought I would wear white, and I think I made the right decision with that white suit.
Still looks great, by the way,
Yeah, thank
even
you,
today
thank
on
you.
there. It looks absolutely magnificent in the
It
light
does.
and on the
Thank you,
stage.
thank you.
Listener, fame travelled well with you, didn't it? Because you became rather great friends with David Bowie,
Yeah, very
who
close.
wanted you on Young Americans.
Yeah.
Were you disappointed that Ritchie stepped in and goes, no,
Well,
we can't do that?
it was going to happen. The band had a meeting about it, and it looked like it was going to happen. And David was waiting for me to answer him. And on the 11th hour, Ritchie said it won't be good for the band if Glen Hughes is, working with Bowie, doing whatever Bowie was doing that year, whether it was going to be Ziggy Stardust or whether it was going to be Young Americans. But David was very close, and I was upset, but I understood what Ritchie was saying. But in general, if you know me well enough, Tim, I've always been one to change. I've never really liked to stay in the way I look, the way I sing, and the way I write. It changes every year.